On behalf of the German Association of Asian Studies, I have the pleasure to welcome you to our online roundtable discussion. My name is Margot Schüller, and as the Vice President and Executive Board Member, I'm representing the host today. The German Association of Asian Studies is a non-profit scientific professional association that brings together scientists of Asian studies. In our work, we focus on all parts of Asia, including Southeast Asia. We support the transfer of knowledge based on research on Asia to the general public, and we promote the exchange between science and practice. And in this context, today's discussion on Quo Vadis Documenta 15 takes place. I'm sure that the discussion will contribute to a better understanding of the different positions held by German and Indonesian scholars on the Documenta and on the boundaries of art. And please note that today's roundtable will be recorded. Before I hand over to the chair of this roundtable, Professor Arndt Graf, I would like to thank Dr. Patrick Keilbart from the Goethe-Universität in Frankfurt for his efforts to make this roundtable possible. I wish us all a fruitful discussion, and now I hand over to Arndt Graf. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this introduction, and thank you for giving us the space and the opportunity to come together today. This is a very special moment. Documenta is over, yet we are still talking about it. In a way, to illustrate the point, on this side, you see a black and white copper engraving, contemporary art from 1797. On that side, you see the green thing up here is part of a painting of an East German painter from the former DDR. Both clearly historical situations. And also the Documenta is now over, so academic research, academic analysis about this past event can start. And today we have a number of panelists who were part of Documenta. Mr. Reza Aifisina, for instance, and Dr. Alexander Supartono are here, who they were part of Documenta, which just recently closed its doors. But we also have panelists here who are part of German academia. I would like to start to introduce the panelists a little bit, one by one. Let me start with my dear colleague, Professor Martina Padmanabhan from the University of Passau, the chair of critical development studies of the University of Passau, a very popular and excellent program in development studies. It attracts a lot of really good students. I had the pleasure to see that in person several times. And also your students, together with some of ours, were at Kassel at Documenta, where we were then welcomed by Mr. Reza Aifisina and saw Taring Padi, Alexander Supartono. So quite nice, we have a nice cooperation. In general, this nice thing is in German Southeast Asian studies, we don't have great animosities, I think. We are good colleagues and we are working together quite a bit. For instance, the colleagues from the University of Bonn have just published this brochure together with the foundation, the NGO Asian House. And I can promote this, show this. It's a very nice introduction, overview, initial analysis of various aspects of the Documenta 15 and the Indonesian content. That thing you can download for free at the Asian House Foundation. Easy to find. It's Indonesian on Documenta 15, so you find that. So we have a quite good network, and in this network, it is also nice that Professor Martina Padmanabhan is actively engaging in a leading role, actually. For instance, in a network that we have created a few years ago about digitization and sustainable development in Southeast Asia. Professor Padmanabhan also has an interest in gender studies. She has worked widely, not only on Southeast Asia, but also on Africa and India. held very prestigious scholarships, numerous publications, a real excellent colleague in our field. And it's a pleasure to have you here, Martina.
Welcome.
I would like to continue with Dr. Amanda Rath. Amanda is an American citizen. She got her PhD at Cornell University in contemporary art of Southeast Asia. And she, I think, was about the first to write about performance art, installation art in Indonesia. One of her publications is this here. She curated an exhibition on taboo and transgression in contemporary Indonesian art in the 2000s. And I think one of you was also present. And so these are all connections. Amanda Rath is currently teaching at Goethe-Universität Frankfurt in both art history and Southeast Asian studies, which is rather fitting because she has an MA also in Asian studies from the University of Hawaii, and then a PhD from Cornell. So, and in the country, she is probably one of the few people who specialize mainly on contemporary art, modern and contemporary art of Southeast Asia. So it's a pleasure to have you here, Amanda. Next on my list is Dr. Susanne Rodemeier, who is currently at Philipps-University Marburg, which is also in Hessen by coincidence, not so far from Kassel. I know Dr. Susanne Rodemeier now for many years. She has been a very stable, constructive force in Asian studies, Southeast Asian studies in Germany. She once represented the entire country at the board of the European Association of Southeast Asian Studies, EuroSeas, for several years. She has a working history in Indonesia, Bandung, I think, where you were, but also in Eastern Indonesia. You were in several German universities, including in Heidelberg and Frankfurt, Passau, I think. You were also, now you're at a seminar for religious studies at Philipps-University Marburg, where you have two hats on. One, you're a researcher, and the second is you're the curator of the collection of religious studies, which is probably a very fascinating field to do. And you have experience with Indonesian contemporary art from your time in Bandung, one of these vibrant places of contemporary art in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia. So thank you for coming. Now we have from our two Indonesian participants, I have the great honor to introduce Dr. Alexander Supartono, who is not only from Taring Padi, famous group that everybody around the globe learned about this year, at least, in the connection with Documenta. You're also a lecturer at Edinburgh Napier University, an art historian, a curator, an educator. You have history in historical and contemporary photographic and intermedia art practice within broader visual culture debates. Dr. Alexander Supartono has a BA in social philosophy from the DGA School of Philosophy, Jakarta, an MA in Southeast Asian Studies with an art history specialization from Ohio University, Athens, Ohio. So that's a little bit similar, the art history and Southeast Asian Studies combination with Amanda in a way. And a PhD in photographic history from the School of Art History, University of St. Andrews in Scotland, 2015. So this is quite a nice mixture, a crossover between academic analytical research and your active practices, art practices, for instance, in the group Taring Padi. Mr. Reza Aifisina is from Ruang Rupa, the group that was given the curatorial role at Documenta 15 this year. He comes from Bandung, Indonesia. He studied cinematography especially on features. Something happened. Werner Krauss is okay. Okay. So, and Mr. Reza was also an artist in residence in New Delhi in 2004, a member of Rangrupa since 2000, and he's often employing video performance installation, often using his own body in his work. In the moment, Mr. Reza Aifisina is enjoying the fall season in Kassel, all the falling leaves in the various colors. And so you have been in Kassel now for 3 years throughout the Corona pandemic, getting to know Germany from its regulations. You cannot do this, you cannot do that. You should stay home, your kids cannot go to school. I hope it was not too terrible of an experience. Now today, as I mentioned earlier, we had a situation where the Documenta is over, where it is possible to talk basically about a past event. And in this, I have a number of questions that we could go through. But before we do that, I would like to rather turn the table and invite the panelists to give their own impact, their own input in a few minutes of a short round. Martina, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Arndt, for the kind introduction. And it's wonderful that finally we are here together, though only on Zoom, but nevertheless, this enables us to meet. Only yesterday, I was listening to our students' presentation who joined our excursion to the Documenta in August. Instead of planning an excursion to Indonesia in vain and having it cancelled because of COVID, we decided, well, let's meet Indonesia in Germany. And we have preparing for this since quite a few years, since I've been sort of also inspired by also the artist Armeniani to reflect on artist practices. And as I'm coming from very much a participatory, sustainable research background, I was truly inspired by artist-led research and sort of the overlaps. And so this is where sort of Documenta crept into our consciousness, and we then joined Documenta with a number of students who presented their little research project yesterday. I have 3 things that stuck in my mind. It's one is communication. Obviously, this is super central, but also the topic of miscommunication. And I very much wonder how much this is due to also intercultural clashes, but also maybe different types of the channels, how we communicate. Also, owing to the public discourse, and here also the different use of different communication channels. This relates also to the topic of conflict. So how has the conflict been on the Taring Padi and other pieces of art, on which platforms, by which voices, by which means has it been debated? And I have very much also a feeling that it's really pointing to deeper intercultural miscommunications between a Eurocentric perspective of the world and what Europa brought in as a sheer provocation on many levels. And the provocation lies in my next point, that is on putting sort of the collective and the commons in the foreground instead of highlighting the individual genie, which is sort of the European idea of the artist, and also how to practice. As I've been researching for a long time on the commons, I'm really thrilled to see this popping up everywhere. But again, here, the issue of conflict is part and parcel of how we deal with shared spaces. And I would also like to discuss how we can actually lead creative conflicts. And last not least, I also realized when we were in Kassel that it was also a very emotional and painful event. And the debate on anti-Semitism sort of triggered a lot of deep felt emotions of shame and guilt and accusation. And I wondered how much this relates to our maybe common, and this is also debatable, inability to mourn the analysis which has been brought forward by the Mitscherlichs to actually understand German reactions to actually the genocide. And I wonder how this might point to the larger issue of how we deal with gross injustices across the world and what the role of art can play in this. So thanks a lot.
Well, thank you.
Looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you. And I noted down a few keywords, and maybe we can pick them up in the course of the discussion, put them together with other things that might come up now in this round. Amanda, may I ask you for a few words, sentences?
Well, thanks a lot, actually, to everybody, actually, for being here. And I'm really appreciative of Martina's opening comments, because a lot of the concerns that Martina brought up are also part of my concerns, perhaps from slightly different perspectives. Yeah, the question about the collectives in the commons, and how this question about communication, but also how do ideas travel? How do they travel, and how do they take root? How are they transformed as they travel over space and time? And how do they take up different meanings, different sedimented layers of meaning as well? To the point, and I think that Martina was really good at also underscoring the question of conflict. That conflict is part of that communication, and as ideas travel. For myself, a lot of what Martina brought up have really been part of my questions too, so I don't want to be too repetitive about this. However, I do have some questions about how far, and I think Arndt, in some of his opening provocations, if you will, in the email that he sent around are really quite spot on. The question about how far can you take this concept of Lumbung and how has it translated? And then there was a student yesterday in Martina's class, and I think it was Niklas or Matthias, who brought up this question about how have processes and practices that are associated with Lumbung, how have they actually been practiced elsewhere, but maybe under different terminologies that are highly specific to those locations? And I looked at that partly because one of my interests, of course, has been artistic terminology, aesthetic terminology, and how these are translated across time. What words are used locally? How are they misinterpreted? How is misinterpretation part of this transformation of ideas? So for example, one thing I've been asking a lot of people, what does experiment mean? What is experimental, right? And is there anything that we can suggest? Are there processes or practices that that we can talk about, but under which terminology? And this lack of reciprocity, or this lack of understanding, I think, is something that we really have to take into account when we're doing any kind of discussion about art history, for example. I'm also questioning, I would like to maybe bring up with Reza and maybe even Alex about this, and even open it up to the larger discussion or the larger panel. Is this consistently the word friendship showed up repeatedly in the discussion? What does that mean, friendship? What kind of words are being used? And is that kind of like a false friend? What does friendship mean in English, German, Indonesian, stuff like that? And when you're actually constructing these relationships, that was a word that was consistently used a lot. And somebody asked during the student excursion, well, what happens when those relationships turn sour? And what does it take to have a relationship turn sour? So I question this question about collectivity and about, I think I underscore and I second just about everything that Martina asked. I would really like everybody to, take those questions as a frame, especially also very quickly. I'm just throwing ideas out there because my research is very much into the development of collectives, art collectives across Southeast Asia, and what does that mean at different times and the history, because Taring Padi and also Ruang Rupa, for example, their history is now more than like 2 decades long, and they emerged at a particular time, a sense of urgency, and how, but that sense of urgency might have exhausted itself and it has evolved into something else. Again, also with Lumbung, Reza during the student excursion was so interesting to express the fact that a lot of collectives started out getting a lot of international funding, but they realized that there's no permanence, there's no sustainability in these processes of practices. So you had to come up with a model of sustainability, but it's in constant evolution and transformation. So I like I said, I second Martina's questions with a few of my own. Again, I'm wondering about this friendship and how these relationships have, the question of sustainability, because there are so many keywords that are consistently being used, they're almost being emptied out of meaning, so I would like us to sort of maybe come back to what do we mean by these terms as they evolve over time. Maybe I'll just leave it at that. I see lots of friends there in the audience, and I'm so glad to see all of you. There's lots of art historians there with us today, who like Verdo Kraus and Claudia Koenig, and I would also like to mention, getting back to Martina's idea about the affective nature of this inability to mourn, the inability to reconcile, because the inability to mourn. I think somebody that we should actually look at, who's not here but is known to some of us, is Wulan Durgantoro's work, and she her article with Elle Kent is part of that publication that Arndt introduced at the beginning. Part of Wulan's work is definitely looking at trauma from a very specific perspective of 1965 Indonesia.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I also took a few notes, Amanda. I will try to put that into a sequence then later, into structure. Susanne, would you like to give an initial statement?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very pleased that I was invited to join this group, and I feel there are many other people whom I know who would have to say perhaps much more than I do, but I have a certain angle, of course. As Arndt mentioned, I'm now a curator at the university in Marburg. There we have a museum of religions, and we have had in the summertime a special exhibition in the Marburg Mayor Hall on current to the Jewish life in Marburg. And this was more or less exactly at the same time as the Documenta was running. So I unfortunately are one of the few, I guess, who was not going to Kassel this year. So if I discuss with you on this topic, I do it from an angle of not seeing the art personally, directly, which it is a shame, I think. I would have liked to. But I followed very much the discussion also, not only in Germany. I tried also to follow at least the Jakarta Post, what they write about this from an angle from not only the German viewpoint. But as we have had this exhibition on Jewish life, it was never, the discussion at the Documenta was never in the middle of our discussions because the program was running already. But of course, it was a discussion on the side. It was a side topic which came up once in a while and more differently strong in different strong ways. And I recognize that at least one of those who is very much interested in what was discussing and what was going on and how the Indonesian side understands what has happened. He is joining us today too, which I think is perfect. Arndt was raising it already, that I came in contact with Indonesian art when my husband and me, Peter Kistler, some of you might know him, we were in Bandung from 1992 to 1997, when Peter Sternhagel was a leader of the Goethe-Institute. And during the farewell party for him, artists from the ETB were painting a picture which was comparable to this, which was not, it was a huge screen where a group of people was painting. And I want to tell you this because now the situation came back to my mind and it confused me a little bit, that it was the idea of doing something or painting, doing art collectively or together. And I observed a situation where one of the artists was painting something and then he went away and another one came and he did not, what I expected, proceed with this what existed and made something different out of it or extended it, but it just painted over it and did have something totally different. And I said, that's strange, that's not respectful. So it was not my socialization and idea. And I said, okay, so put it in this angle of what if now at the exhibition in Kassel there were pictures shown that showed their own history, how this starting Padi developed to the kind of art they are presenting today. I thought, yeah, why are they showing this? Why couldn't they change it if they see that it's not fitting it anymore, or if they don't want to change it, what happens that this is finalized picture, so that a moment comes where one does not change anything anymore? And is this not a moment where one should explain a little bit from 20 years later what we see today in this picture, what we understand in this picture today? So that's where questions coming up in my mind. Maybe because this came also up because I was doing research for several years in Eastern Indonesia, especially on the island Alor in NTT, where we don't have we have a clan structure. The social organization is coming with clans. And in the clan, there is quite inside one clan, it's a quite egalitarian society. And if they do art, it's at least in the village sides, countrysides, they do art in the way that it is for the ancestors, or it is somehow combined with religion. And we have artists who are able to carve very good, for example, but then they prepare what has to be done. But then there's one person who does the last paint or the last cut, and this is the author of this object, and no one is allowed to change anything with this. And but this person is also responsible for everything with what now happens with this object. And this, I think, I have the impression that this is an important, or might be an important difference from Java and from other areas, but this is also a question, I'm not sure. Yes, and what else I wanted to say? Yeah, maybe one further point about this. You were raising this point of Lumbung Padi. I also would like to discuss this with the Indonesians, whether this is I think Lumbung, as far as I understand it, it's more a gudang, or it's a place where you come together and collect things, collect wealth or food or harvest. And this we have in all over Indonesia. But, and this is something very special because there, as I know it from Eastern Indonesia, you can go in the countryside, you have your fields nearby, and you are out of the village and out of the village control. And there you are able to relax, recreate, meet people you never meet in the village because everyone recognizes and controls you. And I'm not sure whether it's really so different concept. So it's, I have the impression that it's not connected with sawa, with white rice, but it's something that might fit everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And one last point, the point of art. I have the feeling, it's also interested for you more experienced with art, that this is something which is exists in towns, in big towns, in Java, in Bali, but it's something that is not really known in other areas of Indonesia, and especially not in the countryside or in the poorer areas. But it exists something which is similar to art, and it is very artificial. Because it is done for the ancestors, for the gods, and there one does the very best one is able to do, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think we will have more time to go into details.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
you.
I'm trying to weave it together a little bit in the structure later. Who of you, Reza and Alex, would like to speak first? Is it the curatorial team, or is it Taring Padi, or is it you as a person? Then it doesn't matter who comes first. Alex, would you, or Reza, would you?
I can start.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's easier for you to decide actually, Art. But since I opened the mic, I will start. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. I would like to start with the lumbung. This remind me to a discussion that we have, Taring Padi had with Ruang Rupa in 2019. This is long before the Documenta started. I remember one of the discussion is asking, one of Ruang Rupa asked me, because of my research on the sugar, the photograph of the sugar plantation in colonial Indonesia, they asked me what happened during the cultivation system in the 1830s until 1870s, those 50 years. What happened with the villagers who had to plant the export-oriented plants, like sugar canes, like tea, coffee? What happened with them when they couldn't plant the rice? And one of the answers is lumbung, because they have lumbung. So they have not only as a storage place, but also a working communal concept where people can share, where people can share if they have more, and those who needs can take from there. So this kind of survival methods in the time of difficulty. So somehow Ruang Rupa successfully developed this kind of survival method using this symbol and also the concept of lumbung, because that relates very much to the way we, the artist collective and artists in general, survive during under the military dictatorship of Suharto for 32 years. And then without the existence of state support, without the support from the market, because we can't sell our works, the way we survive as a collective through this concept of lumbung, where everybody share what they have more. So basically, it's a very simple principle for each according to their ability, and to each according to their needs. As simple as that. So that's we Taring Padi understand the concept of lumbung that is being introduced by Ruang Rupa as the working principle of the Documenta 15. So this is about the struggle of the collective in difficult time, and there is no denying that we are now in difficult time in the global or the planetary scale. That's the principle behind the Documenta 15, to create a space, to create a platform where the dialogue between different struggles in the global South can take place in the West. Yeah. So that's the dialogue between different struggles, and therefore, yeah, the hope is to create the dialogue with so-called the West. Although I have to underline this, within our principle of Taring Padi, and I believe that the principle of Ruang Rupa as well, we have moved beyond the divide between this East and West, because basically we are living under the same economic and political system. The neoliberalism is the winner in the past. I don't know how many decades, and that's our there I use this term, our common enemy. So this kind of dialogue should take place. How we can create the solidarity, how we can create the dialogues, and how we can share the resources. So Fred, that's first the concept of lumbung. Perhaps somehow this resonates certain kind of nostalgia of the build of lumbung, the wet rice plantations, all those kind. That's also fine. It's that in art, nostalgia works really well, but that's not the main principle why the terms of lumbung being applied for the Documenta 15. And the idea of sharing, and this kind of idea, radical sharing, I can put it in that way, somehow struggle to find its practical applications within the system of Documenta, yeah, as a established institution. So one of the Ruang Rupa, Farid Rakun, give a very good metaphor for this. This is simply different operational system that crash. The operational system that Ruang Rupa and Documenta try to introduce, with the concept of sharing, with the concept of hosting, the concept of hospitality, and all those things, with the system that already established since the 1950s. Yeah, that's that, and this crash of operating system happened in almost all different levels. From the most practical level, for example, Documenta's struggle to deal with the fact that Taring Padi has no bank account, that Taring Padi technically illegal because there is no what do you call it, the tax number and all those things like that. That kind of level to the conceptual, to the conceptual levels, how to deal with anti-Semitic allegation, for example. Yeah, how to deal with the when things have to enter the legal system. When that controversy happened, the first thing that start to appear is the difficulty to identify who to blame. Yeah, who was the author of this People Justice Panel? The author of those collectively. We, Taring Padi, the author. Who are Taring Padi? Yeah, the people who been working with Taring Padi in the past 23 years, 100-something of people. So how in that kind of case, how you bring this into the legal system, for example. So that's those. So just to give you the illustrations how these two operational system crash, and this crash, in my in my view, in our view from Taring Padi, create the not only miscommunications, but also the impossibility to have a dialogue. Yeah. Miscommunication assume that there was a communication took place, and then it just doesn't work. But that communication itself never took place. Yeah. So that's part of the problem why now we are still keep talking about Documenta 15. I want to comment, and I'll stop after that. I have two comments about what Amanda Rath, and very good to see you, Amanda, by the way. Questions about the idea of friendship. Yeah, friendship has been mentioned so many times in different kind of expressions about the host, because actually this is the thing that maintain our struggle, the friendship. What else? Yeah, we don't have a funding system. We don't have a. This is the main. Friendship maintains the sustainability of our existence. Let's put it that way. So for Taring Padi, there are two poles that we've been saying about this several times now. There are two poles that maintain our existence. That is the friendship first, and the second is the ideology. So ideology get us together, and while we are try to materialize and try to do something with our ideological inclinations, the friendship develop, and in turns, this friendship nurtures our ideology. So this dynamic between friendship and ideology keep us going simply, because, and that's the concept of Lumbung. The friendship provide the platform to apply the concept of Lumbung, because there's element of trust. Yeah, if you break down the Lumbung concept into the modern financial or accountant system, that will break down, because that system doesn't, that kind of system doesn't recognize trust, for example, doesn't recognize sympathy, doesn't recognize compassion. How do you monetize all those kind of qualities? Yeah, so that's what, in my experience, that's what Documenta 15 tried to bring. We try to materialize what has been discussed since the 60s about the collective, about the, we remember about the flux, about how to the interactivity, about the relational aesthetic, you name it. But we apply that radically. That kind of this kind. Then we learn things as well. We learn the lack of established art institutions, the lack of the quality of hospitality. It's for us to be hospitality. It goes without saying. If you visit our house, the first questions that we ask to our guests: have you eaten? So eating is the big part of it. Yeah, and Lumbung is to store food to begin with. So the application of Lumbung concept and the activities of cooking and eating, that goes without saying. And yeah, sorry, I'll stop. Thank you, Arndt.
Okay, we have more rounds.
Yes,
more rounds.
Of course.
More rounds.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Reza, please.
Actually, thank you very much for everything that's already mentioned. And Alex is already quite clear, because most of the time we also having like, I mean, like, this is the things that we in our what's it called, like how we put this dynamic concern about having lots of many conversations, because that's the things that happen within our surrounding. especially back in Indonesia or even in Jakarta or even within us during when we're in college time and such, like this to have lots of different conversations and broader gestures of like being together, like supporting each other, putting admirations, getting inspired with, you know, like most of this that we are involved since that we are relate. So for us, this is like really important because the things that comes to it is what Alex already mentions, is the notions of trust. And then suddenly you feel very comfortable for being like really honest. Like that's why you share mostly what the things that you had as a part of how sufficient you are. Yeah. So we're talking about resources, not talking about like how you lending money during our college time, but could be anything. Could be like place to sleep, you know, like this kind of like a model of sharing. That's the notions on how this behavior of cooperations that create this mutual support between different kind of entities, you know. And now considering also non-human as a part of, you mentioned like sustainability is talking about environmental and something like that. So it's also included non-human things. Sometimes that's the things that we mostly forgot, because most of us already comfortable, we feels like quite familiar with everything, and then suddenly we are out of focus. So this is also have tendencies on how perhaps these particular relations could be as well to sour, but that's quite normal as well. Because inside of collective also, there's like particular singular individuals who sometimes create their own dispute, quarrel and such. That's quite normal. Just like foods on the tables. Sometimes some food is getting too salty, sometimes food's getting too sweet, sometimes it's too spicy and such. But the next round of eating could be like much more better. Could be like different menu, different recipes and such. So for us to have or to acknowledge Documenta in the beginning, what we are concerned is not concerning about so-called big grandeur cultural or art event. We always thinking in our perspective that this is like a very important resource. If we believe in one particular resource, then what we're thinking actually is kind of like how this resource could be shareable, how this resource could be meant to be being shared. Because as you know, we don't think that this is our privilege, because we could say no in the beginning too, like when we get selected and such. Because we also have like particular our responsibilities to regard our ecosystem back in Jakarta. And we also have like our responsibilities to regard our own individual practices and as well as a collective of Ruang Rupa. We are not curator, we are not politicians, we are not diplomats, we are an artist. And we are not also artistic director. We have experienced it, that's all, that all. But like to regard our experience, like to regard our artistic approach and such, when we consider that this resource is really important. What we're thinking about Documenta is actually what the first thing that we're thinking about Documenta as a resource, actually with what we're dealing is Kaso. How about Kaso? How about this particular ecosystem? You know? Because this is also like the things that could be in the sense makes us learning up until today. That's one of the reasons that why like two of us from Ruang Rupa would love since the beginning knowing Kaso, would love to stay here and working directly here. We love to meet the people. We love to hang out in the train stations. You know, we just love to deal with the no matter what. Like they saying like, oh, this is winter time and such. We don't care, because in Indonesia we could just like really hang out everywhere. And then like partly like we could just like really try to embed, try to have like this observation to meet people and to make friendships. It is like that's really important for us. I mean, it's even more important than create a networking so far, because this kind of like how we grow also. This is like part of our what our behave to like dealt with some of the new situations coming. For sure, there's a lot of things that we should learn up until today, and for sure we also give a room toward our many process that dealt with the so-called mistakes. and also that's give us a room also for us to seek for forgiveness, to apologize and such, because this is like how we compose up until today. Like this is like all these particular process that overlapping, not suitables. Could be fermented other ways, and from this particular fermentation, that's going to be like another different gestures of fruition, just like composting also. So this is like the things that mostly quite being very difficult for us to articulate. That's one of our thing, because since the beginning of, let's say, in the beginning of February or March 2020, there's already lots of different conversation, or we call it majlis. We call it assembly, majlis, plenary or something, within most of our dear artists and friends, also the castle ecosystem and such. And then this is like a quite heavy rotations, how we discuss, how we talk, how we conversate about the things the way that we need, because the thing that we could forget within the last summer actually is the light of pandemic. Seems like everyone didn't really care about this anymore. Seems like our process in the beginning of light of the pandemic cannot be it's not countable. But there's the reasons, like within this particular process, we call it like this is quite a normal on how people would like to have what they would like to have only, without seeing any what so-called process and such. Because like, for example, like since July 2020, we already have lots of different things going on in Castle, but this is not one of our reasons we are complaining, but this is like one of our gestures actually, just like Alex mentions, how we would like to not only host something or someone, but also we would like also to see what Castle as a resource, what's Documenta as a part of this main particular resource that could be have a different have like the model on hosting. Like this is already like more than 65 years of Documenta, but there's lots of really tensions, like each of our Documenta series, for sure there's lots of different tensions, and we respected that. And for sure that's the things that comes up to the point within the notions of Lumbung, or you could name it any articulations to regard the way how Lumbung operate in the different regions of the world, how Lumbung being named, for example, about for example, the Mayan context, for example. There's a lot of different contexts of Lumbung anyhow. This is the thing that we need to find. Like, perhaps there's also like quite considered like why we use the word of Lumbung, but Alex already mentions, but for us, Lumbung also considers as a symbol of hope and togetherness. That's much more important. I mean, many Indonesians know what Lumbung looks like structurally, and then what is being used, the thing that Susanne mentioned, for example. It's used like that. But like that behind this particular scale of how Lumbung being articulate, there's lots of importance when Lumbung being activate. And Lumbung being like a sort of gestures on how people quite feel home within these notions. They have like sense of being home, and we found Castle that way too. Since the beginning that we arrived, we feel home here. So for us, it is like for sure there's a lack of on how we are integrate. There's always like a notions on how we dealt with this particular falsity to regard our process and such. But this is the thing that we need to embrace. And what we compose up until today, for example, to regard several or most of these particular sensitive issues that being mentioned since the beginning, like we never like really thought that when we get selected, let's say when we announced since 2019 example, like some of the media, I mean, we're talking about no media, but not most of the media, but some of the media is like really already addressing since the beginning came from the global south. But actually, to be honest, we never like really thought that this is like the northern part or the west part and such, but there is still like they mentions like we came from the global south. Yeah. So in the beginning we are really concerned like, what is global south? This is like an excuse, like, you know, rather than telling that we came from the third world or something like that. So it's like these notions, like how they see us or how they perceive us, you know, how they would like to see us. Seems like we are not in the equal sense. Yeah. But we didn't mind about that because we thought that that's why we need to introduce ourselves over and over and over again. That makes us more. That's our practice anyhow. Not only here in Germany or in Kassel in particular, but back in Indonesia too. We are in Jakarta. We don't know, like perhaps some other friends toward our other friends in different islands perhaps didn't know also about us. So that's why for us this is like a very long run, and collective for us is the way that we are living, and also partly like the way that now like the things that we learn also from Taring Padi. It's the way of us living. It's different from the things that we mostly learn or know. Like many collective is just like grouping. They work collectively, they work together, but they're not thinking collectively. They're not like really living collectively. For us, like before that we get married, we get children and such, actually most of us staying together for 10 years. Or even before that, back in the 90s, for example. So that's the behavior that we are mostly generate most of the time. So I think that's all for me. But thank you very much.
Going to start in a moment. Martina, do you have a direct question, or can I have a little bit of a spiel? This first round already gave us in the room here, a rather big room, a nice impression about everybody here. I just want to observe something. This roundtable discussion is being recorded, and it's going to be on a website of the German Society, our Association of Asian Studies, the DGA, together with other recordings. So you basically have a live discussion being transformed into a library item. And then you can compare. So we are talking about this topic today in this angle, and other DGA recordings talk about other topics. There are various interesting issues that the German Association of Asian Studies is currently organizing in terms of online roundtables via Zoom. But then you have to know, what is the institution? Is it trustworthy? And I would say yes. It has been established in the 1960s. The Volkswagen Foundation at the time was supporting Asian studies, the expansion of Asian studies in Germany, especially contemporary Asian studies. And the German Association of Asian Studies in Hamburg, with its headquarters at the time, was the one vehicle to connect the different chairs and departments and institutes of Asian studies, first East Asian studies, then East and South Asian studies, and then also including India and other parts of Asia over the decades. 55 years, not 65 years like Documenta, 55 years of the German Association of Asian Studies, and everybody can become a member. But for us here in academia, it's interesting to see that there's a library that is being constructed. And as scholars, we usually go to other parts of the library in order to write our term papers, our BA thesis, our master thesis, our PhD thesis, habilitation thesis. It's not enough to consult one source, but to consult other sources. Have primary sources, of course, but also other sources there that can be combined and compared. Are the similarities in the past, are the similarities in the present. In our libraries of Southeast Asian studies in Germany, yes, you find also publications about, for instance, anti-Semitism in Southeast Asia. There's part of the research that has been going on in the last decades, not only anti-Semitism in Germany in particular, but other parts of Europe, other parts of the world. So this is maybe interesting for further research. We would encourage future research projects that would look, for instance, at some of the trigger points of this discussion. What we could go into is maybe look at some of the concepts, including the Lumbung, or starting with the Lumbung concept, and compare them with other concepts that have been talked about in the past, as you find it in the library. Martina, would you like to say something in this connection?
Yeah, I can try and then deviate my attention. I think there's nothing wrong with the invention of traditions. If Lumbung resonates with sort of advocating collective also as a survival strategy under a dictatorship, and I think this is very much the reality and where sort of a lot of collective artwork from Indonesia comes from, and I think which wasn't known in Germany at all and not taken into consideration and considered as the context. I think Timodile, others gave very good, important contributions in the media to also give the background to the historical situation. Nevertheless, what I observe, and I think it's really wonderful that we are here today, creating a historical document. And just by the way, I'm definitely going to have a course next year to analyze Documenta, to look into trying to understand what happened. And I would very much sort of with all of you to continue on this conversation. But what puzzles me now is, Alexander, you mentioned the dialogue actually did not happen. So this really, I find this very sad and troubling. At the same time, it's confronted with the notion of friendship, like an central element of constitutional kind of work. Yeah, this dialogue, obviously, I don't know, and I would like to learn more about why it did not happen, what were the institutional barriers. And yeah, with the notion of friendship, I also think it's also something considered in a historical timeline, and it's not you cannot demand friendship, but it's rather a gift. But how can we create a dialogue maybe in situations where no friendship exists or does not yet exist? And you know, we were discussing when we attended Documenta whether from my experience, you know, the most successful communication medium in Indonesia is WhatsApp. So was it a matter of miscommunication because some people were writing emails, others were writing WhatsApps? I'm sorry to reduce this to a technical issue, but I really it would sort of also help my troubled heart to understand more where's the conflict, or also where are the voids of dialogue? I would really love to learn more about it. Thanks indeed.
So the absence of dialogue took place within the institutional dialogue. The first, in the first instant, that took place. Yeah, when the controversy in regard of people justice, the two images within the people justice banner start to viral on the 20th of June. We had a very long meeting and discussion how to deal with it. Yeah, so that's, and then I was in that room. I think Reza was in that room as well, and then I think 10 of us in that room, including the directors of Documenta, Sabina Sherman, and others. And our first question is, can we talk to those who feel hurt with our banners? Can we explain, and can we have a meeting? Yeah. Basically, we asked, can we have a meeting with the Jewish community from Kassel? So if we want to apologize, we want to apologize in persons, and somehow that thing didn't happen. Yeah. So, but the process of discussion during that time produced something quite important. Yeah, the decisions to cover the banner cover the banner with the black. That's I still believe that's a very, very strong artistic statement to create some kind of big hole within the center of castles. It's out the hole, the black hole of history, the black hole, whatever you want to associate it. Like, but then the decision to take the banner down altogether, that was without any discussion with us at all. We were just informed by email that the board member of Documenta unanimously decided to take the banner down altogether. That's it. No communication, and there is no communication after that whatsoever. Having said that, the dialogue with the local community, the people who live in Kassel, the Kassel resident, took place all the time when they visited our exhibition space at the Hallenbad Oos. They came and they make the time to find us, and they talk to us, and they inform us, and that kind of dialogue happened all the time. Yeah, so that's the grassroots level, if you want to put it that way. That's that in that level, there is no problem for the dialogues. But when you move up, and then you can tell that things become very tricky and difficult, because this become a political battle, I have to say. So Documenta 15 become the political battles where dialogue was not required. It's just about attacking one each other, or one-way attack. We didn't have even the chance to explain. So
yeah,
after the People Justice banner, there were at least 4 different allegations addressed to Taring Padi, and they were published in the media, saying that's another figure of anti-Semitism, another figure of anti-Semitism, then other figures that, and then we have to and they were published in the Welt and the one of the local newspaper in Hassel, and then we explained, no, there's not this, there's not that, and there is no apology, there is no correction, and so I only find the word abuse to explain that kind of situations, and there is no correction from the media that published that allegation. There is no response. So this is not about the mean of communication. We were there. We respond to emails and.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. I see a hand, a yellow hand, and a real hand.
I had to lower it, I think. Yeah, lower my hand. Okay, sorry. I would like to pull the conversation just a little bit to some of the issues that have been tabled by Alexander, also Martina, but also by Susanne. Especially if we could actually talk about that, you know, that work. It's all, and I have to apologize because we have a very loud cat right now, so you might hear her in the background, but nonetheless. So I want to get back to this question really about that work, because that work now is now iconic, and it's iconic for interesting reasons now. Its sedimented history has changed forever, right? So if we could actually get back to the question about the object itself, the banner itself as a work of art, its history has forever shifted and changed, and it now has a very different layer of history on it. And in the historiography of, say, world art, contemporary art, Indonesian art, stuff like that. And I know that Alex, you know, you deal with questions about how objects change over time and accrue historical, you know, history. And now this work is iconic, but it's iconic now for it's you know what I mean? I mean, what should be done, as you asked in a previous, I think in a previous WhatsApp message, is what should be done with this work, because it now has gained so many different layers of meaning, especially as an iconic work. It's a canonical work now for different reasons than before it was shown in Documenta. So I don't know if I have a very specific issue, but I would really like anybody in anybody in the audience as well to maybe respond to how art really is defined and how it finds itself historically situated. And is this a problem the way it's being captured now? Does that shift its ability as a work to function differently outside of this particular frame? Where does it go? These are very general questions. Am I making any sense, Alex, or anybody?
Yeah, actually, that's the biggest questions that Taring Padi has been trying to address in the past 3 months. What do we do with the People Justice Banner? Practically and conceptually. We've been discussing about this, and I think this is the right forum to have that kind of discussion.
But not only the Taring Padi and the People's Justice banners, as you, Susanne, are now part of history and part of the library in a certain way. Also, the Lumbung concept is.
Yeah.
So as much as you're still living it, Reza, it is also part of history already and part of scholarly analysis, investigation. Susanne, you said earlier, it reminds you of Gudang. The use of Gudang in Eastern Indonesia. I have a little bit of a provocative question there. If you have villages where you not only have one ethnicity living, but say, for instance, Chinese Indonesians living there, would they have access to a lumbung? Or do you have a problem of minority and majority in the access and the use of a lumbung or a Gudang? If that's the case, then one would also have to look into the library, the real library of written stuff, maybe also of objects, and say, aha, are there trajectories where you have a collective use of something in Indonesian intellectual history? Is there, as Martina said, a neo-invented tradition? Are there waves of invented tradition in the 1920s, in the 1950s, in the 1960s? Can we link the Lumbung concept in a way to an idea that was propagated by President Sukarno, Marhain, the figure of the farmer? Is the Lumbung concept a late reborn idea of the Marhain associated with the village that is sharing collectively, and yet, as I understood from your presentations, defending itself against, as you call it, the global neoliberal world order, exploitation, as it was often mentioned in the discussions. So is there a trajectory from the Lumbung to the discourse of President Sukarno, which would be a nationalist discourse, maybe inspired a little bit by Marxist ideas? Is there a connection going back even further to the 1920s and 30s, ideas of an idyllic farm life in Indonesia? Maybe some of you know this kampung boy and the water buffalo, even in paintings. Is the Lumbung associated with that tradition, which is 20s? This is the earlier phases of nationalism in Indonesia. Or is there a connection to the 1960s PKI discourse of farmers and workers and their collective practices, collectivist practices? So that would be questions that one could ask looking into the library now. We have the Taring Padi documented, we have Ruang Rupa's Lumbung concept, Let There Be Lumbung, a series of talks also by important scholars and art practitioners and curators. So all that together would construct one part of the things that we could look at, but also then go back further. I see in the audience, Martina Heinschke worked about LICRA and LICRA's concepts in the 1950s and 1960s. So maybe there are some things that are just coming alive when you compare things. I don't say that this Lumbung concept is a direct descendant of LICRA or PKI-related discourse. No, the question is whether we can map that, whether we can compare elements to previous notions of the collective, village life. And in this regard, we could understand the current or the recent past of concepts with in a historical concept of an intellectual history. That would be the question that might come to mind in this regard. But Susanne, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I try to add my remark on to your question because so with this Lumbung idea, I have the feeling that should be separated from Java or the rest of Indonesia. It seems to be more a Javanese term. Maybe you correct me, I'm not sure. Or not term, an idea. And when you, Arndt, where you just elaborated this, I even got more that impression. If all these points you are raising, they are all going, as I think, into the Javanese direction and does not look at the other areas. But the point, for example, in the Lamahulot area, Eastern Flores up to Alor, we have 2 times 5 groups or clans, groups, Galyau, Watan, Lema, so the 5 coastal areas. And there you have this idea that in a situation of crisis, you can go to the other partner and get everything you need. But this also includes women without giving a bride price, which is usually in other times is necessary. And so women in this case are degraded to belongings. And when you, Alex, talk of radical sharing, you must be careful whether this is really radical sharing, because then it might even include people. But the problem is starting with one point, it rises other points again, which lead us in another direction, and it doesn't make sense. So I don't think you have to react on this, but it's just to bring to your mind, it's not so easy as we would like to have it. And of course, it's extremely difficult and complex. So I think it's Arndt's questions were already going in a direction we could proceed with these at the moment.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't have to be answered now. It could be a master project, a PhD project, or an article in the future, because it requires work. And yes, it's not necessarily going back always to the Lekra quarters. It's also nationalism. Indonesian nationalism has a history of emphasizing on collectivism in the collective struggle against the Dutch, for instance, in the revolutionary period. The 1940s. That what you just said, sharing and also suffering together. In your experience in the 1990s, suffering together and not getting any rewards, being dependent on each other and supporting each other. That's something that also I think previous generations of Indonesians had in the 1940s, for instance, fighting against the Dutch. So that would be something that says that this collectivist memory in Indonesian history could we also have a link back to that period of experience? Yeah. Yeah, Amanda?
Your questions are really interesting. I mean, kind of some of the topics that you've brought up, and I know that Alex has been working on some of these issues over time. And also, I'd like to bring that to Susanne's arguments and questions before about what, the idea that art in and of itself, what signifies as art in and of itself is historical, and it only made sense to a certain group of people at a particular time. It is historical. And so she made an interesting point, and Arndt has also made a point, Alex as well, about even the concept about what signifies as art in this particular case. And there is a kind of, in the 1920s, at least in terms of painting, as far as I know, also in poetry, there is this concept of the exoticization from the urban dwellers of the rural setting, right? That it is oftentimes written and painted as a very idyllic setting. So I mean, that's just my point, and maybe Alex could actually speak to this a little bit more in terms of the topics or themes, threads, even Reza as well, that were brought up by Arndt and also Susanne about really, you know, the term or what signifies as art, what was that, and for whom it mattered. And also this idea about the exoticization within Indonesia and the Indies. I would like, yeah, if we could sort of move a little bit further abroad from this lumbung thing, and maybe, yeah, look at the history of some of the, as Arndt said, you know, intellectual histories about these terms. What do you guys, Reza and maybe Alex, anybody else, sort of, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I just would like to mention to regard the notions of, I mean, for us practice, even back in Jakarta, or even particularly like back in my regions, in the small scale of West Java province that have a border to the south of Jakarta. I mean, for sure, the way that Susanne's experience could be quite different. The way that Arndt mentions also about like this accessibilities. Yeah, I mean, it's talking about like inclusivities. No, like, is there any some like not really this particular lumbung not always create access to the ones that not part of their area or village or such. No? That's the things that we need to find out, because like lumbung as a practice, lumbung, I mean, like the practice of lumbung or the practice of sharing, most of the time it is already embedded. So sometimes we cannot like really name it. Is it like the lumbung spirit or such? Because it's already there. Yeah, like the thing that like if you mentions like about collective, like we know that most of the time we are working together, and we need to work together. We need to unison, you know, to be becoming one unit. Especially the ones that I came from West Java, went to Jakarta in the study during the authoritarian regime. For sure, the way that I felt or the way that I experienced in West Java, it's different. The way that I experience, or I have to gain new experience back in Jakarta too. How me as a personal, as an individual, also need to approach different things. But this particular spirit, it is already embedded. It's already working so far without naming it, without it, even we cannot like really identifying. Sometimes it's really difficult for us. So that's why we for example, if it's connected to this particular dots of articulations, we always naming so-called this particular presentation. This presentation is articulation. How we would like to articulate, how we would like to find other gestures of narrations, how we would like to find different articulation that could comes up when lumbung is the one of the entrance. I mean, we never say that lumbung as a method or a concept is not a title, it's not a theme. Even this could be like ideal, no? Because it's not. Because this is the things that what Alex already mentioned. This is the things that already being working closely with us needs. Our collective came based on our necessities. That's our struggles. We never like really create a collective because we need to show something to regard this is our collective. No, because it's based on our necessities. We need to form ourselves as a collective, no matter what, especially during that particular period when we grew up. We know that as an individual, we cannot like really work together. And for sure, in the certain situations, there's always like tensions or frictions to regard others that not belong in our so-called ecosystem. That's the things that we evaluate, because can you imagine on how collective could evaluate themselves and how collective could criticize themselves? That's not like systematic on it. That's not like such a mechanical conversions on it. It's always kind of like a natural gestures of converting into for gaining aesthetic in common. No? That's our practice. That's our needs. We cannot like really, I mean, comparing to Taring Padi, let's say, like individually or even collectively. Did you see any Ruang Rupa's artwork, for example? Because perhaps that's difficult for us to address this. I mean, we don't try to compare, but at least just try to also imagining not only ruang rupa, but also other collective, but also other individual that think and working collectively with other gesture of the local context and such. For sure, that's always a tension. That's not such thing as ideal, but that's the things that always come to us need as a part of how we would like to collect these particular ingredients as a part of our evaluations. That's one other gestures. And for example, when we think about the Lumbung, because at the same period, since 2015, we try to develop this, our model of economy. And it is always connected to economics, right? We're dealing with the different kind of funding, we're dealing with the kind of the poverties, generating searching for funding support, or how to imagining how the supporting support. And then most of our friends that being here in Documenta, the ones that connected to the articulation for Documenta 15 or not, the ones that experience together, actually we have the same connections toward how us could create our own supporting system. That's much more important rather than being separated, rather than being like, you came from these directions, you get more funding, for us, like how we would like to challenge ourselves if we're thinking about supporting system together. Not centralizing, destaging. We need to decentralizing. If we believe in one resource, then spread it. Then see which particular lumbung will open, or which particular place will open, and also inviting others lumbung. So this is the thing that we like to know. So and we think about that even before the pandemic. So there's like a small examples in my neighborhood during that time when the pandemic started to hit us in March 2020. Actually, our village, it's starting for having collective pot again, because we thought it was there already, but actually like this particular practice is changing. It's moving into different directions. Suddenly when these things happen, the light of pandemic happen, suddenly there's like such thing of collective pot. There's such thing of urunan, like potluck. There's always such things like the one who could cook. And there's always like also measuring the security or the safety measurement toward our village. Suddenly it's happening. Post-Kamling or Sis-Kamling, they make like this system of security again. Although it's always there actually, but suddenly it is rise up again to the surface. That's a good thing. Then suddenly we evaluate. Then suddenly we could criticize our society that, hey, actually this system exists, but how that we could forget up until we deal with this particular matter. And then suddenly all over the world thinking the same, that perhaps these notions of sharing, supporting each other's, being mutuals, in respecting each other, like supporting, it is already embedded and it is suddenly comes up into surface. For sure, that's already a challenge. For sure, there's when suddenly this so-called being together is quite profound a gesture, and then suddenly it takes over what so-called dominancy, and the one who becoming is already in the dominant positions now is being threat. But actually it's not about threat. I mean, threat seems like quite a negative gesture, but perhaps we haven't find yet the common articulations toward our practice.
Okay, thank you. Martina, you have raised your hand, please.
Yeah, thanks. You sort of asked you started your question, Arndt, with raising sort of the concept of lumbung, and we did now discuss sort of the historical embeddedness or different interpretations. And but I would like to raise the attention that I see it also very much as a reflection of wider debates. For example, degrowth. The degrowth movement uses the symbol of the mykorrhiza for working together. And I think it's very much also embedded in a wider turn towards shifting from sort of individualistic perception and analysis to ideas of conviviality and collectivism. Mm-hmm. And also what I saw the Biennale in Venice is very much involved in sort of, or reflecting, especially by women artists, how is our relation to more than human beings, how can we picture this? And nevertheless, and I think the question was already asked, what signifies it art? And I, as an academic, would also ask what signifies as research. So how can we gain knowledge about the world we are in? And therefore, I think it's very interesting to confront ourselves with the conflicts and with the idiosyncrasies we have been observing at the Documenta, and dwell on the ideas where not respect was shown, but disrespect, and where conflict was beyond this, or despite the sort of mantra of friendship. And I think for the sake of practice and theory, which goes hand in hand, I think it would be very interesting to really confront these frictions and analyze it also when looking back. And though I also hear the ideology and the sort of the vision behind that, but I think it would be very interesting, for example, also to raise the question, how is this debate perceived in Indonesia, also maybe by government officials? And this might bring us back what will happen with the iconic, or as you mentioned it, the Tari-Pading affair around this certain banner. What is the practical consequence of that, and how does it affect Indonesian-German relations, if we put it a bit more into international relation terms?
This is, if I might relate, so basically what you just said with what Reza said, this working together as something that is attractive for not only Indonesians, but beyond Indonesia, for many people. If I strangely go to the library, I find the gotong royong concept of President Sukarno, which reminds me of that. And I find also President Sukarno opening the Bandung Conference in 1955, where he presents these concepts of gotong royong, of working together, which is greatly embraced by not only Southeast Asian countries, but countries from all over the world. So maybe what we saw here is something we could compare Kassel 22 with Bandung 55. Similar concept, working together and then, Martina, the question is German-Indonesian relations, but also broader. The Bandung Conference gave Indonesia a big stage and a big place on the international stage. It helped Indonesia to keep independent and to become more influential international relations. So again, here at the German Association of Southeast Asian Studies, if you look at the history of it, most of the presidents of this association were former German ambassadors. It has a deep link to the foreign policy interests of the Federal Republic of Germany in the times when the country was still divided, and also now. And so the question is then whether this Lumbung appeal that we saw in Kassel, that it was really embraced by many people from other parts of the world, not north or south, but other parts of the world, whether that's another moment of basically something like a Bandung spirit. It's the emphasis on the commons, as you said, Martina, and that would mean that there could be also impacts not only in Indonesia, the Indonesian discourse, but maybe also in Ghana or in India on discourses there, if there's more emphasis on the collective or on the commons. So for this, the Lumbung concept, let there be Lumbung, including this recorded sessions of scholars such as Philipp Pirot or others, could be part of this investigation. Yeah, Amanda.
Well, I was just going to mention there are some people in the audience that, like Philipp Pirot, maybe even Antoritza. I noticed that Antoritza was there, maybe even Alex. Other people in the audience could probably speak to that as well, because they have quite a bit of experience in a lot of the questions that we've been talking about and debating. Maybe some people in the audience there might also have some feedback. Okay. Just opening it up.
Yeah.
Hoping.
we have a number, or I got a number of messages from the audience. One was asking about the ideological part of the statement about the ideological thing, ideology and trust. Isn't that something that ideologies create boundaries? And trust is maybe having a problem with such boundaries. Mas Antariksa should say something. Where is Mas Antariksa? Not here. Another person was comparing the Lumbung concept, asking the Lumbung concept, cynically could be compared to the Bullock. This is a system from the New Order. A rice was stored, and in order to be distributed, however, it's also known for big corruption scandal. So the lofty concept of the Bullock as something that should support the people was then misappropriated. That's another question that I saw from the chat. So maybe we have time for an open Q&A now. We have about 15 to 20 minutes left.
Can I say something? Please. About this concept of Lumbung? Yes, I understand it is difficult to disassociate the concept of Lumbung with the Java centricism, with the idyllic view of boy riding water buffalo and all those nostalgic kind of thing. But also it's also difficult to disassociate the concept of Lumbung with the Bullock for those who understand the corrupt natures of Indonesian under the new order. I'm not saying that we are not corrupt now, but yes, it is difficult to disassociate the concept of Lumbung with all those things. But may I remind that first of all, Ruang Rupa, I remember that clearly. There's clearly stated that they are not represent Indonesia in Documenta 15. Yeah. So the associations of Lumbung with any kind of practice in the past in Indonesia, that little bit irrelevant in my opinion. Although of course in terms of this discussion we can make that kind of association, but like you said, Arndt, the concept of gotong royong that quickly embraced by many countries, that's what that Ruang Rupa try to do. I think try to lift this concept to the beyond the national or even regional level. Yeah. So I don't think I can't see any kind of productive thing coming out by associating the concept of Lumbung with all those things that I just mentioned earlier. Although that historically part of that. The fact that Ruang Rupa and Astaring Padi often referring to the things in the past that related to the Lumbung concept, because that's what we know. And that's what we want to share. That's the good practice that we want to share. Yeah, without necessarily bringing all those ideas of Lumbung in that respect, in that nostalgic respect. And I want to respond to Martina questions about the notions, how the significant, how do we signify the artwork. I think we can start for us at Taring Padi, we begin with the purpose of the artworks. We deliberately utilize art for political tools, as a political tools. That's our art always produced within certain social and political contexts. Yeah, so we are not creating art for the sake of creating art. This is not about the strike of individual genius and what. No, that's our art always serve certain social and political purpose. That our methodological foundation, the way we work. Yeah, the foundational principle of our work. So in that respect, in that light, we more comfortable with the terms of art worker rather than artist. We call ourselves pekerja seni, which literally means art worker, not an artist. First. Second, that kind of notion using art as a political tools also translate to the absence of individual authorship within the collective work of Taring Padi. Yeah, you will not find any individual names in any collective. So this disappearance of individuality in order to serve the cause of the collective, that I think quite radical in that respect. Yeah, it is also radical in the process of distribution. The distributions of goods, the distribution of if we get when we get money, we distribute it evenly. Either you are the most senior members, or you just join, start to hang out with us 2 months ago, you get the same amount of money. That's also radical in a way. So that's the absence of hierarchy in there as well. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. We have a question from the audience. Teku Ferdiansyah Taji, please.
Hello, thank you everyone. My name is Ferdi Taib and I'm based here in Berlin and moved here 10 years ago. I'm also part of Collective Kunci, who is actually also involved in Documenta through Arts Collaboratory. So I guess, yeah, I'm thankful for the discussion today around Lumbung. The complexity around Lumbung actually is very important. And for me, the biggest disappointment is actually how that this doesn't translate at all in the public discourse in Germany, especially as the hosting country. And I'm just wondering, and maybe this is more a question to the German counterparts with regards to like this impossibility of dialogue that happened, which again, I say I live here for 10 years. I learned a lot with regards to encounter with German cultures and society, with regards to anti-migrant stance, with racism, with Islamophobia and so on, but it's never this difficult in a sense that because no one basically are willing to engage in the dialogue. And we do, like I guess every country has taboos. Like Indonesia, for the longest time, we are like there. It's still a taboo to talk about the Prophet, to talk, and for a while we couldn't talk about the genocide in '65, although now it's increasingly become a part of public discourse. And I learned now that in Germany, and I thought I heard about it, but I didn't realize the scale is this deep with regards to the this guilt and trauma around it. That I just wonder that, because my imagination or my perception over Germany is kind of like open society and tolerant, and coming, I guess a lot of artists was also surprised coming here, finding that a lot of the discussion then go into censorship as solution, and which is something that we kind of ran away from in our own home countries. So I don't know if you have any comments with regards to that, like whether actually we just should just accept this as a taboo and then never talk about it anymore, or is actually there are space to talk about this that, yeah, you know, could be more critical and reflective.
Right. Is anybody from the panel who wants to respond to this input? Yeah, Martina.
Yeah, thank you for your comment, Ferdi. And I sort of share also this confusion very much, because yeah, maybe I can also speak as a daughter of an Indian father, but also the daughter of a German mother, and and I recently sort of detected how deeply involved my grandparents were actually in as active fascists, and so it troubles me in many ways, this public or missing debates and the accusations, you know. And I felt, while we are struggling to come to terms with our history of genocide and colonialism, it's loud thinking, so to speak. It's pointing to a curator group from Indonesia is sort of deviating attention from ourselves and our continuous responsibilities to come to terms with our past. And this is what I also mentioned with the lack of empathy, and maybe to avoiding spaces to actually talk about that, and making sort of Ruangrupa as curators responsible for the lack of empathy and consideration we have shown as a society. You know, to put it a bit bluntly, Germans are sort of world champions in genocide, but now they also claim they're world champions in sort of dealing with their past. So not reconciliation, but Vergangenheitsbewältigung, I don't know even whether there's an English word, and expect sort of the whole world to go along with them. So obviously Indonesians' concerns and issues are different. Nevertheless, there is this overlap of how have been Jewish sentiments violated. I think we cannot leave that aside totally, but I think it's a really a wild mix of deviating responsibilities and looking for also kind of scapegoat. This is a bit. These are things which really bothered me the most, I think, at the Documenta, and so it's a bit work in progress, thinking in progress. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, Susanne. Yeah. Yes, your microphone is mute, Susanne.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I can very much follow your thinkings and appreciate them, but on the other hand, I also had the feeling it was a very strong reaction from the German side, and a not very thought through reaction, which was in quite a number of parts too overflowing and seeing everywhere anti-Semitism. I can give you an example in a minute. But on the other hand, I think I would like to go back to Martina's question before, who asked what's the reaction now in Indonesia. And I think we all know that in Indonesia, anti-Semitism was strong for quite a long time. And a student of mine, she was preparing a seminar test about Judaism in Indonesia, and she couldn't find anything. She just could find anti-Semitism. This was some years ago now. And what struck me was Arndt sent me a WhatsApp some days ago that now in Bandung there is a discussion. Tischner is organizing, the artist with Asia Link, that they now start to discuss on anti-Semitism and what is meant with this and what's behind that. And I really my personal impression in Indonesia was always that there was no connection. One didn't know about Judaism, one didn't know about Israel, and one accepted everything from the fanatic Muslims and saying, yeah, it was, maybe it was not even accepted, it was just not thinking about it. And I had the feeling that in this starting Padi picture that there were all these symbols in it, and no one of the Indonesian part recognized that they are in it, and before the Germans exploded. This is somehow strange, and there is something behind it which also the Indonesians have to think about. And if this event results partly also in the discussion in Indonesia on anti-Semitism and Judaism and the relationship to Israel, and really reflecting on it and not just following the mainstream, that would also be an advantage. But on the other hand, in Germany, the reaction was, of course, very strange. And this is like the other picture where this black and white picture with a figure which had this head on, and then there was put a black thing on it, and it was discussed with this, what do they do there? They're just putting a black stripe on it, and no one recognized that this was a Peci. And when I saw this, I said, it's a Peci, but why is no one explaining this anymore? And which I can understand very well, because no one wanted to go in this shitstorm again, I think. But there was no way to start again to discuss, and that's why I very much like our discussion here, that we start on a very different level. I hope you also have this feeling to talk to each other and to think what really had happened and what interests us on this. And we know Indonesia very well, and we like Indonesia, and we like to be there and to understand it and to, yeah, whatever. So this was maybe one of the problems, that no Southeast Asianists were coming to help to interpret the different sides. Yes, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking at the clock, almost coming to an end. Maybe if we put it together, we are in an age of heightened globalization, where pictures and images and roundtable discussions travel globally. And there is not yet a universal culture with the same taboos and the same tolerance for transgressions. We still have our nation states with the national cultures, national regulations, national taboos, and national histories. So that might be part of the problem, that we can easily, also physically, travel by plane and then suddenly be someplace. However, arriving someplace and then learning a place takes years, sometimes decades, until one knows about all the sensitivities that are around. So I think one can put this, if I may, Alexander, put this Padi affair, or controversy, as I said, into one line with the Danish cartoon affair. Although the difference is that the Danish cartoon affair was triggered on purpose, that newspaper in Denmark wanted to provoke. While I don't think that the people who 20 years ago were working on this banner did want to provoke somebody in Germany 20 years later. I don't think so. So this is a coincidence. But yes, these are incidences where images in this case are traveling faster than the context that comes with it. And so maybe it's time for us to increase our awareness, our efforts to understand what's going on, why these troubling experiences are happening, maybe more often now than they used to do 20 or 30 years ago. So that's also a part of our globalization experience. For this, in the last minute, I would like to express my hope that the study of Southeast Asian art, modern, contemporary art, but also ancient art, will become one day a regular part of art history programs in Germany, not only of art events like the Documenta or exhibitions, but of the institutional framework. If you want to, if you assume that the contact with Southeast Asia, also the visual contact with Southeast Asian artworks, will increase in the future, then there needs to be knowledge, there needs to be understanding, also from the German side. It's also something that's not there yet sufficiently, I would think. So a lot of the reactions that we saw in the media were coming from people who were not used to or did not know enough about Southeast Asian art. I would think this is one important thing. And that would also include maybe museums, art museums. As much as museums of anthropology are already doing the thing, I think it's the place for the art history museums to include Indonesian and other Southeast Asian art, African art, South American art, South Indian art, South Asian art into their collections. Like if you go to the Museum of Fine Arts in Philadelphia, you have that concept, for instance, already. It's a museum of world culture, of world arts. I think that's something that we should also realize, being highly globalized, and Germany is a highly globalized country because of the great dependency on exports. We should maybe think that this should be something where we should also build up the libraries about books for Southeast Asian art history on a national level, but also in our departments. So that requires another push for building up the institutions. So going back at the end to the beginning, we are at the German Association for Asian Studies, an association that was founded 55 years ago with the support of the Volkswagen Foundation, the city of Hamburg, the German government, because they realized back then in the 60s that Germany as a country had come into a new era where Asia had become more important. Overseas countries in general, but also particular Asia had become more important. I think now it's a time we have to realize that globalization is continuing, is increasing. That means that we have to increase our awareness for the world outside of Europe. If we want to understand what's going on at events like the Documenta. In this regard, Quo Vadis Documenta 15, hopefully there will be more international curators and artists in the future. Hopefully the experience will be much more diverse, getting out of the German centricness of the Documenta's past, or Eurocentricness of Documenta's past. That would be something that would be what I would hope for. And also that there would be more cooperation, maybe with other international art events. It doesn't always have to be in Germany or in the state of Hessen to have, here our panel is consistent of Marburg and two times Frankfurt, talking about Kassel. It's all in the state of Hessen. So maybe we have to overcome our own Hessen-centricness for a moment to look beyond that. A final note, thank you also from the German Association of Asian Studies. Frau Schüller had to leave early. She said to me earlier, there is an opportunity for everybody here to become a member of the German Association of Asian Studies and to visit the website for that. So, okay, I'm forwarding this promotional video at the end, this advertisement. I would like to thank everybody and the panel, everybody in the audience for coming, for sharing. It's, of course, not a start, because you already started talking about this intensively. The Ruang Rupa members, Taring Padi at the Documenta, the media here in the room have reported about already. Our institutions, various institutions here, the German Indonesian Society of Cologne, for instance, I saw somebody, Mr. Humann from Berlin. All these people are already in the business of distributing, dispersing news about Southeast Asia. But today we have a global audience. We have people from America, from Australia, from Southeast Asia being present. So in this regard, I hope that we have produced a nice piece for the visual library, the video library of the German Association of Asian Studies. It can be consulted again and again. If you can sleep, you can watch it again, what we just said. And with this, I would like to thank you very much and hopefully see you again, healthy without COVID one day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Best regard. Have a good weekend. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. It was so fantastic to see all of you as well. Thank you, Arndt. Thank you, DGA, Alex, Reza.
Bye, Alex. Sampai ketemu, Alex.
Bye.